We're live. Jeffrey Duke, our good pal, founder of LL Supply, founder of Blue Friday, which we're going to talk about both those things today.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You are our first official podcast interviewee as well.
First three-way.
I feel honored. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. A lot to live up to, but thanks for having me.
You bet, man. You actually ran your business out of this space that we're in. Just that room over there.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, as it was collapsing around me, I moved in here for a short period of time.
Yeah, bit of a fire there, but you got out of it kind of.
Yeah, no, we
and out.
We did.
In and around.
Yeah. Big changes in the business, but COVID, which I'm sure everybody that has ever run a business through COVID said there was massive changes. But appreciate it. You guys were great to us. We got to come in here and store some stock and hang out a little bit, and I think that was the probably hit the most beers consumed during work hours during that time as well.
Yeah, we did.
Which is an impressive feat considering the store was pretty much always stocked with beer as well.
Yeah, there's a lot less beer at Goldilocks these days.
Well,
I think I'm mostly the only beer drinker.
Until
you
do
are
a podcast.
until we do podcasts, and then
we've got our Blue Friday beverages right here. Shout out to Whistle Boy. This is their Blue Sea Gose.
Gose?
We're going with Gose.
Okay, we're going with Gose.
It could be Gosha.
Could be goes.
Goes, yeah.
We'll have to find out. We'll maybe do a little follow up. I've also got a cocktail, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit, maybe.
Okay,
maybe we'll transition out of how that came to be.
Yeah, let's get the focus back on our pal Jeffrey here.
You were our business roomie. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to call you our business roomie for a while when we shared our space. But I think it would be lovely to hear a little bit about LL, because then I feel like that's really from running that business how Blue Friday ended up coming to be. So you want to backtrack a little and just talk about LL a little bit?
Yeah, it was. How far back do we want to go?
Go back to that humble beginning of doing it out of your van. That was epic. I love the start of the business.
Yeah, even before the van, it was like basement business. Okay. So going all the way back to the very beginning, I lived in Australia for a handful of years, and that's where I kind of came up with the idea of clothing's a little bit more expensive there, so we were paying, $50 for a T-shirt that would last you like 6 months. Right. So that was like the original inspiration for LL, was to try to create a more sustainable product that would last longer. And I just went down a rabbit hole of the apparel industry. I'm one of these people that definitely, when they get into something, I can become a little bit obsessive. So I became obsessed with that. And then, so over a year, I ended up moving back to Canada. I'm from Ontario originally. So moved back to Ontario, I had some money saved up to start the business, but a good chunk of that got taken by the lawyer that we initially hired, which is a bit of a separate story.
Give us the quick.
Give us the quick story. So we paid like I think it was, I originally wanted to set the company up, and this is like naive starting a business. I'm like, okay, US is going to be our biggest market. I wanted to move to California. So I'm like, I'm going to set up a US company. If you put a certain amount of money into a US company, you can get a visa for the US. So that was kind of the original plan. So I hired a US lawyer on retainer to set it up, and it was like, I can't remember what the retainer was, maybe like $2,500 US or something like that, to like set up the whole company and everything. And they, the discussion was like, I'm like, $2,500 is like a lot of money to set up a company. You can do this online for like $600. But I was like, starting out, and I wanted to do it right and all that. So we hired the lawyer, and he was like, well, it's a retainer, so we'll just chip away at this, and then if you ever need legal services after you set the company up, your retainer's still there until we get through it. I'm like, okay, fine. First bill was like $9,000 US.
What?
Yeah.
What a dink.
Oh, it was brutal.
No heads up.
Guy? Name him.
Shame
him.
I honestly, I probably would shame him, but it's so long ago, I can't even remember his name now.
All right. Where'd you find him?
He was actually an introduction from someone, but it was one of those introductions where I'm not going to do it, but someone at my firm will help you. Okay. So, anyways, I got billed like $900 US for like sitting on. Yeah, but not part of it. Like it was broken down, and there was like almost $1,000 for sitting on hold with the IRS one day. Oh, it was brutal. Yeah, so it was, and you can incorporate a company in the US for like $1,000 at most. If you do it online, which obviously now I know, but at the time I did not. Yeah. So, pretty much lost like a good chunk of the savings that I had. before I'd even gone.
Did you pay him the full $9,000?
I did. So there was another. So that was the first. So that was like 30 days. Invoice gets sent via mail. That should be the number one sign that you are dealing with the wrong person if they mail you an invoice. So by the time I got the invoice, it'd been about 6 weeks. So there's another invoice already in progress from the 2 week by the time I dealt with this. And so I told him to fuck off. I wouldn't pay for the second invoice, but I paid for the first invoice.
Jeez.
Yeah. I figured starting out, I didn't want to fight a lawyer.
Yes,
So
great.
I paid the first invoice and was like, stop everything, don't do anything else, and pack it up. So ended up incorporating the company in Canada. That U.S. corporation became like a subsidiary of the Canadian one. And, but yeah, so it started off pretty rough. And then, so I had to actually stay. I was going to move back to Ontario and then come basically go on a trip like in the van. You mentioned how it started in the van. So that was kind of the plan, was to set up a distribution facility for the product and then run it from the van. Yeah. And so I actually had to stay back for another year and get a job and save up again to start the company. So I spent almost a year in Ontario.
What job were you doing?
I was I did an electrician for a bit, and then I was just bartending.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, quick, fast money. Yeah, I got to work on the business in the day, and then bartend at night. Yeah. Which worked out because that's where I met my now fiance during that year that I stayed back. So everything happens,
I didn't know that.
for a reason or whatever they say. Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Anyways, then it got kicked off. So it started during that period. I started like basically in my parents' basement. Yeah. When I was moved back. So
and then you bought the van and built the van in Ontario.
Bought the van, built the van out, set up distribution for our apparel, and like set up our supply chain so I didn't have to handle product. And then the dream was basically to like be able to travel and work remotely and
off your surf trips.
Right off my surf trips. Yeah, and just indefinitely travel while running a company and making an income. Right. Another really naive decision at that point, but you got a dream.
Yeah, some people can figure it out, but it's not easy.
I think it's something that you can figure out, but I don't think it's something that you start with.
Yeah, it's like you have to build the thing.
You have to build the infrastructure.
Yeah, you have to put the work in the beginning and then figure out, I think, from there.
Yeah,
definitely. Like you have to kind of put in a bit of a grind in the beginning.
Definitely. Yeah. It's a big jump. So yeah, I did the trip, and part of the trip was I wanted to get into retail stores. Part of the business plan was to have a wholesale channel. So I went to about 50 different shops from San Diego to BC.
Nice.
And I got 50 no's. Yeah. So that was another tough one. But we were selling at this point. Like we had a great launch online, and we were selling our product online, and I was making money and traveling, and it was going fairly well.
Were these small shops, or like were they?
No, these are like small surf shops.
Okay.
Small surf. Some bigger ones that had 3 or 4 locations, but they weren't. It wasn't like massive. Multi across the country kind of chains. It was more small shops. And yeah, I got 50 no's in a row pretty much. Actually, we got one yes, and then they canceled it after like right away. So, yeah, that was pretty deflating. But kind of just relooked at the product and like, why are we getting no's and how do we differentiate ourselves? And we made some sustainability updates and stuff. And then I got to Victoria, which that was the end of the trip where I wanted to move here. And the first yes we got was from Whole Foods Canada. That was our first retailer.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I didn't realize that was your first one.
That was the first one.
That's huge.
Yeah. So, I like to tell that story as like, don't quit.
Totally.
So that was a huge deal for us. And we got distribution through Whole Foods Canada. And then not too long after that, we got a handful of other shops. And then we got into Mech, which is another big Canadian retailer. Yeah. And yeah, it was kind of off to the races from there. Those were like 2 big wins for us, and the product was consistently like gaining traction online. We had a great following and community around it, and so after we got that Mech, that was what really kicked it off, and we started to see some success, and I started hiring people, and yeah,
that's right. Then you had the store in Uptown.
Yeah, then we set up a flagship store in Victoria here in Uptown, and we started the store almost 1 year exactly before COVID.
Right.
So we had this like nice ramp up where, you know, I stopped bartending. I was making an income from my business for the first time. We had, I think we had 5 or 6 staff, a couple part-time people, a couple more full-time people. And, yeah, everything was rolling really good. And then, so we had a year of kind of super fun and like growth and exciting. And then COVID hit.
Yeah. And then retail's dead.
Yeah, retail died quickly. We were like in the middle of signing our next lease. So we had a 1-year like pop-up shop lease and we were going to extend it. Our intent was to sign a lease for a larger space and have like a coffee. We ran some events, which were really, I know you guys were there, so I didn't tell you, but they were super fun. We ran some movie screenings and we had like 100 people turn out to
they were super
in
fun.
a place that cannot hold 100
yeah,
people.
it was a small store for 100 people. Yeah. So that was, but we wanted to create that like sense of community. There's such an amazing surf culture here, but there's a surf culture, but there's not really a surf culture, if that makes sense. Like,
right. It's just Sombrio.
Exactly. You see everyone out. There's, you know, there's what, like 2 surf shops?
Yeah.
3 if you include the one out in Souk. And it's, you know, it's, that's what we were trying to create, is that sense of community around that. So,
would you say maybe that there's like a surf culture, but maybe not a surf community in the same way? Or
yeah, maybe I like worded that poorly, but there's definitely a surf culture here. But it's kind of, it's very, I don't know, comparing it to Australian surf culture, it's much more public events, people getting together. Coffee shops will run movie nights. Surf shops will have events where, you know, sometimes pro surfers come, they do their movies, which we've actually seen happen a little bit more over the years. I just got an invite today to one. Like I think Arc'teryx is doing one with Ben Whelan, but it's there just wasn't a lot of that when I got here, and I was like, you know, this is having a store like this is something cool we could do. So we were gonna sign into a lease on a bigger place and put a coffee shop in the front and like a whole working area. Mini ramp. Yeah, we had the whole thing and it was going well. But you know, right when we were starting to negotiate to move over, we'd moved in April or May, I believe. So COVID kind of came like March was like the initial.
That was the like full blown.
That was like the
March
full blown,
17th
the shutdown, right?
Sent everyone home from here.
Yeah. So it was like a month and a half before we were in negotiations to sign a lease for a space 3.5 times the size of what we were in, and open a coffee shop in like an event space, which, you know.
Ian, you were talking to Miggy about having like the photo studio.
Yeah, we were gonna do a photo studio in there, and we were in full dream mode, and the business is going well, so you get to have that fun when you get, you know, and I think it would have been successful. I think it would have been definitely successful, but 100% would have not been successful during COVID having an event space. So whatever, call it dumb luck or what you want, but we made the decision not to re-sign a lease at that time, just because there was so much uncertainty about when we were going to be able to open and when events were going to happen again. And, you know, we were kind of thinking at that point, I was like, you know, if it's 6 months or 12 months like that would be hard to carry that space without anything. Turned out it was like 2 years.
I was gonna say, and like, let alone getting into like supply chain issues and things like that. Because at that point in time, everyone's thinking, this maybe is just going to last for a few months, and you don't even think about the logistical side of things at that point.
Effect,
that's just the dominoes.
Well, that's what ended up killing us, was the supply chain. We one of our main suppliers went out of business, and just as e-commerce was taking off, so we were doing really well in sales, but our supply chain collapsed. And we were like single source, which was a huge business lesson for me. We were basically relying on one individual supplier to carry and produce most of our product. So as soon as they went out of business a couple months into COVID, we had to try to rebuild our supply chains in the middle of COVID, when everyone else was like flat out producing as much as they could for e-commerce sales. So no one was really taking on new customers, and we'd set the bar so high for ourselves on what we were doing for sustainability that we couldn't really access like the blanks and, you know, simple kind of easy ways to produce. So we ended up being out of stock for like 6 months, and it really just like sucked the momentum out of the company big time. Obviously had to lay everyone off, which was shitty. And
but there's a reason why you only had that one supplier. It was because of the uniqueness that you set up within your manufacturing process or your life cycle of the product.
It was very cool what we did. We produced like only offcuts and upcycled clothing. So we only produced with waste fabric. We never made new fabric. So we would buy end of roll, offcuts, discontinued stock, and it was a really intense sourcing process. And then we would cut and sew limited edition apparel lines out of those. So these were typically like landfill bound in some of the like the third world countries that we would buy from, like in Central America, and that they would actually just like roll them out of the back of the factory and burn like 600 yards of apparel, which is like 600 t-shirts, just being lit on fire because they don't want to store the waste, So we set up a couple of supply chains to get that done, and then we were buying from big factories and stuff, offcuts, and it was, in hindsight, it was a really cool way to produce, and it had a great story to it, and we were definitely producing a unique product, and the limited edition aspect means that you have kind of one of so many of something,
right?
But from a scalability standpoint, that's where we really needed, like, I was trying to focus on that when the company was kind of going down. I was like, okay, how do we scale this? Like, we're getting to a point where this is like too difficult to take to, the next level. And then we never really had the opportunity because it kind of collapsed. So
scaling and growth is such a, it's almost like it doesn't quite match when you're doing something with a sustainable, like, I understand, how corporate profits need to continue to go up, and because the world is getting more expensive, like your rent's getting more expensive, transportation costs are getting more expensive, so year over year you have to continue to make more money. But when you're like, we run this too, it's like, as a sustainable company, you have these ethics, these values built in that are so counterintuitive to that strange beast outside of our business that just keeps trying to push you, and you have to like keep going with it. And so sometimes we're just like, I don't want to like necessarily grow, or like I'm having to compromise on some of my values to just keep up with this strange, machine that we're inside of, which is like always the fundamental problem of sustainable businesses in the way that our world is set up.
Yeah. I'm curious, Amy, did you start with sustainability, or did you start and then become sustainable after you kind of had momentum?
We started with sustainability.
Yeah.
It's
the origin story.
The origin story is very much, I just
want to help your mom
stop using plastic wrap. That was the goal. I was like, my mom needs to stop using as much plastic wrap as she's using, and that was the flat line, like baseline initial goal, was just get her to have an alternative and use that regularly. And then it grew into a business. And then I think the other side of that too that becomes tricky is, having ethics around how we produce everything with all of our products, but also wanting to get our product into as many hands as possible. And so then that's where that like tipping scale, or that like push and pull of scaling, becomes, I think, extra tricky, because you don't want to sacrifice any of the quality, any of the, how things are being made, or how you're sourcing, or the sustainability side. But in order to get into sometimes some of these bigger locations, that's the expectation. They want you to, be able to cut your pricing, and they want you to be able to, offer things for super cheap, which means you can only manufacture overseas. And then, we've had conversations, and we don't ever want to do that. We love that we make everything here. It allows a lot of control for us too, in terms of the quality, and just isn't really what we stand for. But it's hard because there are other companies who are going to fill that gap, right? And so it's just always a kind of like gut check, I think, every once in a while with that.
Yeah. I think it's, I have so much respect for businesses that start with sustainability, because a lot of the companies that I see do sustainability really successfully, they kind of do it when they're at scale.
Right.
Which I think makes it easier. Like, economies of scale make it easier because you already have that price advantage. Where when you're starting out, making things sustainably, or hand making things in Canada or whatever, it's way more expensive.
Totally.
So you have to sell to a luxury market, really. And it's very difficult for you to compete on price. Wholesale becomes incredibly challenging because you might only have, a 60% margin, and they're asking for 50 or whatever it is. So, once you hit economies of scale and you get to a certain level, I feel like sustainability becomes a little bit easier. If you're already selling 100,000 of something, it's a lot easier to say, okay, can we make that shift to sustainability? We have seen this with, particularly in apparel, there's been a handful of companies that have started out not necessarily so sustainable, and they've moved into that and been able to maintain, a certain price point because they already have that economy of scale.
Right.
In your opinion, I'm going to interject because I have a question. Do you think that those brands that don't start with sustainability and who are making or attempting to make the shift are actually doing things sustainably, or do you think that they're spending marketing dollars on essentially greenwashing?
It's case by case for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's as many probably in both categories. I think there's a lot of brands that are, selling sustainability. I have to frequently check myself on Instagram. I don't want to be one of those people that like bashes other companies, but sometimes I'm just like shaking my head at what, what people are calling sustainable. It's got to be the most overused, it basically has lost all of its meaning over the last decade.
Absolutely.
But it's, I think there's as many businesses in the category that are, full of shit as there are that are genuinely making, a transition.
Yeah.
Vissla, I think I'm working at Vissla right now. LL underneath, but
I got my LL.
Yeah, you got your LL shirt. Oh, nice.
Some holes in it.
I don't.
Come on, Amy.
I'm sorry, but I know I usually rep them all the time. It's the one day.
Vissla, I think, has made a really neat transition. And, it's not perfect, but that's a whole other thing. We're kind of getting deep into the sustainability thing here, but, the expectations on sustainability, and I'm sure you guys get this, it doesn't really matter what you do. There's going to always be someone that criticizes that criticizes how you can do it. There's no, there's no perfection in sustainability. It could always be done better. Even organic cotton still takes 2,600 liters of water to make an individual shirt. Yeah. Somebody could very strongly argue that calling organic cotton sustainable is a load of shit. It's really not when we're facing a water crisis in the next 5 years globally. So, there's always something. But that being said, is organic cotton better than producing, pesticide laden cotton? I would say yes. So it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it depends what factors you're looking at, and you can kind of argue, I think, in circles around certain things too. Yeah,
for sure. Like in apparel, polyester is hated now. It is one of the worst. It's been branded as one of the worst materials from a sustainability standpoint. It's a petroleum-based material. It's made from plastic, and I find it really interesting that's happened. And because all the companies producing organic cotton have said, no, we're not going to use polyester anymore. We're going to use organic cotton. There's a lot of stuff for athletics and especially outdoor mountain climbing, mountaineering and stuff like that, where like you're not going to wear a cotton t-shirt, you'll die.
Right.
So, performance materials are often made from polyester. The really interesting thing about polyester is it can be recycled almost 1-to-1 because it's plastic. The problem with polyester is when you wash it, it sheds microplastics.
Right. You had those little microplastic balls?
We had the microplastic balls, which were good. They caught a portion of it, but this is really easily solved at a, policy, like government policy level. Like why does every washing machine sold in North America not have a filter on it?
Right.
Problem solved.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm at problem solved for microplastics. You clean your filter, same as like you have a filter in your sink
or your lint filter.
Yeah, your lint filter, and
cycled into the lint filter.
Such a simple solution.
Such a simple solution to mitigate that microplastic issue. And I find it really interesting. There's a lot of potential with polyester because cotton and organic materials are really, really difficult to recycle. So from a circularity standpoint, it's really difficult for them to be broken down and recreated into an equivalent quality material. Because each time you recycle them, it degrades. The fibers become less tough, basically. But polyester can be melted down into pellets and resewn into the same quality fabric again and again and again and again. Not quite 1-to-1, but much closer than... So I think there's an interesting opportunity with polyester as like a material that we should be focused on for circularity. But because of marketing, everybody hates it.
Yeah.
So
as soon as you hear petroleum and plastic, people are just like, I'm out. Don't do it.
Well, and
but how much water are we wasting over here? Yeah. And people are like, well, I don't know. I can't really see that. It's right? like you can't look. You said, I don't know how many liters you said to make a t-shirt.
2,600.
2,600. I'm like, I can't picture what 2,600 liters of, like, it probably almost fills this room.
It's a shit ton.
It's a shit ton.
Yeah.
But like, it's like too far away, right? But if you say there's plastic in this, I'm like, I know what plastic is.
Yeah.
And I've seen it, the pictures of plastic in the ocean and the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Like there's like that direct, but I've also seen massive bodies of water where I'm like, I don't know, it feels like we have a lot of water. I know that's not true. There is a water problem, but there's a disconnect there. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things too that I think you have to have the systems in place, right? Like that's what you were talking about with it. In theory, it's a really great opportunity for a circular economy, but having to have those systems where people have a place to take those clothes, right, that are actually going to be turned into a different product. It's kind of the same issue that we have with recycling right now, right? Like how much of our recycling goes into bins. I forget what the statistics are, but it's astronomical. I think something along the lines of 80% of what goes into a recycling bin it just ends up in a landfill. So, which you also did with a little bit a sort of newer iteration of LL, right? Where there was going to be a bit more of a closed circular economy.
Yeah, that's what we were always striving for.
Yeah.
Like when we started using the waste material, like my goal was always to, I think sustainability, like the root of sustainability for me is reusing what is in existence and not using natural resources to produce new products. We have a limited supply of natural resources in the world. As much as we can figure out how to not produce using those, the better we're going to be, moving forward. So that was always the goal when I started out and I went down that rabbit hole of like trying to figure out how to create clothes sustainably. We always had that end game of trying not to use natural resources or raw materials. So the way that we did that as a stepping stone was using waste materials or recycled materials for our beanies, and that we used, and then like our headwear that you don't really wash in the washing machine, we used a lot of recycled polyester for that. And for the clothing, we obviously used what we talked about, this upcycled stuff. So that was always the goal, was to get to circularity. And we were developing software that would help like manage a circular program, all when the company was kind of ended up struggling there. So we always wanted to get there, but unfortunately, with some of the business decisions we made, we never got to execute it. But it's coming, it's happening. Like it's happening. Tentree just released a circular program. Shout out to Derek and David and the guys there. Like we've talked about this over the years, and it's sick to see somebody executing it. There's a lot of amazing companies now with really exceptional technology that can honestly recycle polyester clothing like nearly 1-to-1. I think it's like a 3% waste on
Nice.
Processing or something like that. It's
how
the
do you
future.
make this circular? Yeah, the life cycle circular with a T-shirt, let's say, that's a good user experience. So like I buy a shirt from Tentree or LL, if you had it up and running, and 6 years later or 10 years later, the shirt's toast, and I contact you, and then you just send me a return label and it goes off to your facility like free of charge for the customer? Or is it built in on the front end, like I pay a little bit more because I'm contributing to that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is like one of those things where there's a million ways to skin the cat in this example, but you can do it. We wanted to do it as like a subscription program where like you would pay a subscription to be a part of the circular program, and then we would basically track the life cycle of all of your clothing, and once a year you would have a free shipping label to ship us back any clothing that you had.
All right. Yeah.
So you could basically once a year from your account creation date, you can print out a label, ship us back any clothing, but we had life cycles set for clothing as well. Like you really shouldn't, nothing that we make should last you less than a year. Even a good quality t-shirt should kind of like minimum last you 4 years, even with like heavy use, if you take care of it properly. So that was the way we were setting it up. But I think it's from a user experience standpoint, I think the really interesting thing there is I think businesses should be responsible for the waste that they create in products and packaging. I think this is another policy thing that would be, game changing in this sustainability, is like companies, if you made them responsible for the waste that they create. So right now it's this weird thing that's just happened through the growth of capitalism where customers are responsible for disposing of the product.
Right.
Once the customer owns it, that's it. It doesn't matter. Like you could package it in, 6 layers of plastic in a box with packaging and everything, and the customer's got to figure out how to get rid of all that. I think an interesting shift would be making companies responsible for what they were creating. I think it would reduce waste significantly, because so many times it's just cheaper to put all this shit around a product than it is to, you know, put some thought into your packaging and how the product's created and what the end of the life cycle is. Like, if you made a company responsible, you know, for a $2 t-shirt that would last somebody, a promotional t-shirt that's going to last them 2 weeks before it's 3 sizes smaller just because they wet it, like, they're going to stop making those immediately, because it's going to cost them way more to get rid of, you know, to manage that on the other side. So
do you find that when it comes to accountability, that small businesses are held to a different standard than big businesses by customers? Like, do customers have a higher expectation for a small business that they're going to put those things into place, that they're going to have eco-friendly packaging, that they're going to have that transparency on their website, but that this customer may also shop at Walmart and not think about those things?
100%. Yeah. And it's a very strange dynamic.
I also think it's that with a small business, there's a face.
Yeah.
Like, people can yell about Amazon, and I mean, there's Jeff Bezos, but like, you can't go and talk to Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
You know, you can't, like, you're never going to see this guy in public. He doesn't live in our world.
Yeah.
He's off somewhere else.
Yeah.
I think he's not like a real figure.
You mean he's not going to be on the podcast?
Maybe next year. But you know, yeah, I think there's something to that as well, that it's like, people definitely bitch about big companies constantly, and they're like always in the hot seat. But it just doesn't really faze them. Like, it doesn't matter. It affects small businesses, because when small businesses take heat for doing something, you're like a person who's just like trying to do the right thing.
You're answering your own DMs.
Yeah, exactly. You're like in the trenches, and you're like, fuck, guys, I'm trying my best here.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit, can you guys just chill out? Take it easy on me.
Sustainability critics for sure. Price is another huge expectation that people put on small businesses, that like, I should be able to pay the same price that I pay on whatever it is, Amazon or Walmart, for your product. Right. And, you know, if you're selling a t-shirt at, you know, $39 or $45 or whatever, you're a criminal. Right. Well, that $6 t-shirt that you bought from Walmart, they probably made more on that t-shirt from as a percentage than what we are on ours.
It's so complex to educate people on. I mean, you've been down the rabbit hole, and I'm sure it's still quite murky of just like what happens where and how companies, you know, cut their supply chains or boost their bottom line. Like, it's a messy world, right? To try and understand and explain to someone so they can really get a good gauge of like, okay, if I buy this shirt from this company, it's $40, and they're telling me it takes them, it's like $12, right, to actually produce that good. Like, that's good. Okay, you know, they're probably doing things correctly. But then, Walmart, you go and buy a shirt for $10, and like, you find out that it's worth like 25 cents to make. But how do you verify any of this? Like, nobody really knows. Like, it's so many steps down, right? You would have to go on like a wild 1-year excursion of investigative journalism to like get to the source of how anything is done. And that goes with our food. That's like everything. It's just like, it's such a mind melter to try once you start going down the sustainability path. Like, it'll drive you fucking crazy.
Yeah. I think you had a really good quote, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm going to see if I can get you to recall it instead. That was during your TED Talk that you gave, and it was about who pays when you're specifically about clothing, and it was something, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And it was something in the vein of, there's like 3 different things that end up paying. Either the customer pays, the person producing the clothing pays, or the environment pays. Yeah. And you have to basically pick one.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Welcome to Amy's TED Talk.
You probably remember that better than I could have. That's 100% right. And I think, it's such an interesting dynamic for expectations. I think one of the most powerful things that I learned in business and in marketing is you need to become comfortable that your product is not for everyone.
Well said.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Like, I think when you're getting in, like, you're really starting out to be like, you know, you really want, especially because you're working so hard, you're putting in so many hours, you know, and a comment on Instagram can literally like ruin your week, you know? And at the start, it feels so intense and like, oh man, I'm trying so hard. And, you know, whatever, like Deborah here from Seattle is like fucking pissed that,
Really
you know,
grind
we're
my
doing
gears.
this, and
Yeah.
like that, you know, I have tape on my boxes. Like, oh, okay, well, I got to try to figure out how to, you know, make sustainable tape or something now, right? So it's, you know, but I think at the end of the day, you know, that's a really powerful thing for business owners to understand is your product will not be for everyone.
Right.
And you need to focus on the people that it is for.
Right.
And, you know,
While still
fuck everyone
listening
else.
to that feedback.
100%.
Yeah.
And the tape thing's probably a bad example because there is better sources of tape out there. You don't have to use plastic tape, but like, you know, just, it doesn't matter like whether you're in software or beeswax wraps or apparel or whatever, like your product is not going to be for everyone. Some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to think that your brand is shit and they're going to be angry, and it's probably not anything to do with you. It's probably more a reflection of themselves, but like, you know, there's going to be people that dislike what you're doing for whatever reason. And especially online, you're like so exposed to it because they're exposed
to everything.
Yeah. There's just everyone's out there. And I think,
and you get in front of people that didn't expect to see you.
Yeah.
Which is another interesting thing of the way that social media algorithms work, right?
Yeah.
It's just like your product or your brand is going to get served to someone that might get just offended by it because they didn't want to see an ad about a hat or an ad about beeswax wraps.
Yeah.
And they were already having a bad day, and they're like, this person is going to fucking hear about this.
Yeah,
and they
for
just go
sure.
off, but then you're on the other end not knowing any of that context.
Yeah.
And it cuts deep because, like you said, you're grinding on your business, putting all this love and passion into it. And then one person is just like, you suck. You guys are the worst.
you're a
pieces of
criminal.
shit."
You know how many times I've been called a criminal for selling beanies at like $39? Yeah. I can buy this same beanie for $6. Okay, well, it's not the same beanie, but you know, like
That's a
put it on
whole
your
other
head.
conversation.
like we get, you know, I can buy this beanie at H&M or I can buy this at Walmart for $5. Like you're charging $39. Like you're a fucking criminal, you know, trying to rip people off. Like we get that shit all the time. We used to get that shit all the time. And you know, I think it was a powerful thing for me to come to a point where like, that's not my customer. And frankly, like, I don't give a shit what he says or she says. Like if it's, you know, if they're the person that's going to buy a $6 beanie, they're probably not the person who cares about how or where it was made or anything like that. So
totally, you can point them in the direction of some educational resources, and then whether they choose to learn about that, that's on them.
Go for it. Well, I had the one reply rule. What do you guys do on? Do you do the one reply rule? Yeah. So.
Tell us. I want to see if it's for the same reasons. Tell me yours, and I'll tell you mine.
I like did this to myself, and then eventually to our like social media managers that we did one reply. So whenever someone would criticize us or you know, comment on an ad or, you know,
Just come in with that hate.
Come in with whatever. You know, it even applied to positive things. It was across the board. We will reply once to the comment, and usually we would direct them to resources, you know, like whatever it was. If they were dealing with manufacturing, we obviously had blogs and sections on the website dealing with how we manufactured or whatever it is. So we would reply with one comment, and then no matter what anyone else said on that thread, we did not engage, because you just get down a you just get there's nothing benefit. It's like, what's the old saying that like nothing good ever happens after midnight? Nothing good ever happens after the first comment.
You get into a deep dark hole of like just battling back and forth. And so we have a similar rule. If it's positive, we'll get into more of a conversation. I feel like there's sometimes a little bit of back and forth depending on capacity, because TikTok's a bit of a beast these days. It's hard to kind of keep up with everybody, but we do our best. But I feel like the one comment rule was definitely geared towards people who were leaving like nasty or negative comments. And it was usually on paid ads. I found that it's not really has ever been a big issue on any of our organic channels, because the people who are following you are typically there because they want to be there. Ads are different. Like Brett was saying, you know, this thing's just popping up in your feed and you're like, I didn't ask for this to be here, and they're maybe a little crusty or whatever. But the agenda was very much go into it with a response, not necessarily to change somebody's mind, because you probably aren't going to do that. There's the odd time, especially when Brett was doing comment moderation. I feel like I was
a lot of replies. I never did the one comment.
But he would. We were joking. We were joking that we needed a bell, because every once in a while he'd convert someone, and it was really great. I can't do that.
Once in a while, I would just cross the line and say something I shouldn't have said.
Brett got removed from comment moderation. I feel like that was a short stint.
I'd love to see some of those threads. I hope you,
Oh,
I hope you
man.
saved them. I hope you saved them.
They're out there.
Yeah.
But I feel like
The internet
now
remembers everything.
that's true. We're gonna get famous on this podcast. Someone's gonna do a deep dive and find some
Find some
threads.
threads like Goldilocks hate comments.
So quickly.
No, but I feel like
Fuck you, Karen. They're $28 for a reason.
I feel like the reason, at least in my mind and kind of the way we, train staff now or anybody that's kind of dealing with the public is because even the people that work with us, like they get really bummed out when we have negative comments. It's hard. It's actually a really tough job. You have to have a really thick skin, I think, to be in the world of social media and be able to deal with a lot of the just like shit that gets stirred up. But the one comment is typically for everybody else that might possibly read the comment thread.
Yeah, it's the same as replying to reviews.
Yeah, so it's instead of, I'm not necessarily going into this thinking that, you're going to change your mind and that we're going to get into a massive argument. It's so that people who are curious about our product or, maybe saw that comment and go, oh, maybe, now I have a question as a result of someone saying this. They see that we've taken the time to answer. First of all, we're not avoiding anything. If you're a reasonable human being, probably you're going to read our response and go, oh, okay. Like, that makes sense. Maybe not, but at least it's going to give them enough information that they can make a decision rather than someone just kind of stirring the pot and not having anything to go off of.
Yeah, it's the same as reviews. There's some really interesting stats on negative reviews, and I'm going to butcher the numbers, so I'm not even going to say them. But as many people read the replies to negative reviews as they read the negative reviews. And I can't remember what the actual statistics are, but I think it's very heavily weighted that the company replying with a resolution to a negative review is almost as good as a good review.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's the same in comments. Like if someone throws hate at you and you reply like, rational adult, which I don't know, maybe Brett.
Most of the time. 99% of the time.
Then, people weigh that just as much as, or if not more than the person. Same as that's why it's so important always to reply to every review.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's massive.
And try to take it offline.
Yeah.
That's like,
yeah,
yeah.
like go to email.
Yeah,
or
go to
like if it's an
email.
actual issue or like something like that.
So like when you're replying to reviews, and we studied a lot of this stuff for the business I'm in now, and it's reply and take it offline. So basically, we understand your frustration. Let's work towards a resolution. Here's what we're suggesting. Sorry you had a bad experience, whatever it is. Like we're gonna send you a new product. We're gonna refund you the full amount, whatever it is. Like list your proposed resolution in the reply, and then basically say like email us here and we'll move ahead on this. Yeah. Just gives people the security of understanding like, wow, this person had a really bad experience, but it looks like it was 100% resolved, so I can feel good about buying from this company.
Yeah.
And then you get on an email thread and really let them have it. Yeah. No, you deal with it.
No, you want to obviously follow through on that.